Hello, I'm Ted Leverette, broadcasting from partneroncall.com. I'm the original business buyer advocate. For more than 30 years, I've been helping people find and buy the right businesses the right way. Our topic today is pitfalls and opportunities for valuing small and mid-sized businesses. I've valued 277 kinds of businesses and a few to dozens of them for most of the industries. My clients have mostly been banks and business buyers. During the decades that I was valuing these small and mid-sized businesses, my clients liked my insight, which differed from many other business appraisers, namely because I've been a deal-making advisor to buyers and sellers, but I've never been a business broker. My focus is on searchers and buyers. And that's why you're going to hear my conversation with Howard Weston. He's the managing director of Lucas and Weston, located in Bath, England. He's an advisor, he's a broker, he's worked both sides of the deal-making table, and he operates a business valuation practice. So if you're like me, preferring advisors who've battled on the deal-making playing field and not merely observed it from the sidelines, I hope you enjoy our conversation. I'm going to ask Howard 3 questions, and I'm going to tell you what the third one is now, because I think you're going to want to stay tuned. I'm going to ask him what to look out for when pricing and valuing small and mid-sized business. Okay, so Howard, why do we need valuations?
Hi, Ted. Thanks. Great introduction there. Valuations. It depends which way you're coming from. If you're a seller, a valuation is absolutely vital as part of the foundation of your proposition. It sets the background, if you like, for the start of a negotiation, and it's absolutely vital you get that spot on. And again, from a buying perspective as well, half my work is spent advising buyers, and half my work is spent, half my time is spent advising sellers. From a buying perspective, it's equally important that you know what the valuation is based on, where it's coming from. And is there even a conversation about value in a deal to be had?
One of the things that I say to buyers and sellers, because it's inevitable that they're not going to agree. It's almost impossible for an asking price to be the one a buyer jumps on and says, "Oh boy, I want to pay it." And one of the things that I say when there's a legitimate reason for a difference in opinion is a professional business valuation. It's the irrefutable remedy when sellers and brokers and buyers disagree on price. And when these valuations are done right, banks are going to agree, buyers are going to agree, sellers are going to agree, brokers are going to agree. But if there isn't something that's done independent, where all parties can see that it's legitimate, then guess what? It's a fight, right?
Yeah, absolutely right. And probably a key thing with that, Ted, and you hit the nail on the head when you say you want to get agreement from buy-in from all parties. The key thing with any evaluation is as you said, getting it independently done. So whatever valuation you've done has got to be from somebody credible, somebody established, somebody experienced, and somebody who all parties can respect. But most importantly, as you said, they've got to be independent. So, separate to, not invested in the process.
Anything else about why we need an evaluation?
Really, I would say the biggest reason is peace of mind. So as a buyer, you want to make sure you're paying a fair price. You're not paying over the odds. You're not being emotionally driven to pay more than perhaps you should because your head's run away with you operating this new business. And as a seller, you want to make sure you're getting the most out of the opportunity.
You know, one of the things that before we decided to do this interview, you sent me something and you said, what is the valuation worth? Is that what you're talking about right there?
Exactly. That's exactly it. The valuation has got to stack up for all the parties who are using it or are invested in it. So there's, in the UK, most valuations are either done by a firm's accountant or worse, a business broker. And that obviously creates, a very blurred outlook of valuation, and a lot of buyers just will not accept valuations done by a firm's accountant or business broker, and that's an area where you can have disagreement right from the get-go.
You know, one of the things I face with business buyers, and it happens every single week, and it's because my buyers who are out searching, they're looking at, they're trying to find at least one deal every week or two. They can at least have a conversation with a broker or an owner. And what they hear all the time are, well, I used the multiple or a rule of thumb that in my industry applies, and that's how I price the business. And here's what we say. I mean, Pete, this is what I say to buyers and sellers. There are no reliable, quick methods. There are no correct multiples. There are no worthwhile rules of thumb. And what I hear is, well, I use these free online services, these calculators that price businesses for sale. Well, to some extent, some of those, the math behind it have to do with using multiples and rules of thumb. Not a good idea, folks, right?
Oh, amen. I'm with you all the way there, Ted. Absolutely spot on. Don't even get me started on online calculators. I mean, they're not even worth. Do them for a piece of fun. It's like a sort of online horoscope or something like that. Do that for a piece of fun, but it's going to have the same kind of value. It's you're reaching for the start. It has no weight, and you've got no idea of the methodology, the maths, the algorithm, whatever is in the background. Even if there is a background, I mean, sometimes it's just people feeding into a spreadsheet, and a guy guessing at his computer in the background. Absolutely not worth worth its weight at all. And both buyers and sellers, you really shouldn't store, any of these things. But unfortunately, they proliferate. The internet's great at many things, and one of the things it's great at is proliferating opportunities to get things wrong. And I think online calculators is one of my pet hates, I'm afraid, too.
Well, let's carry forward. What are some of the other things that people, buyers and sellers and owners, maybe even brokers, ought to be watching out for? What are those pitfalls or red flags?
The key thing with any valuation is it's got to be credible. So what do I mean by that? Well, it's got to be based on experience. You just said a minute ago that valuation, there is no right, there is no wrong, there is no standard methodology. I've sold businesses and I've bought companies doing the same thing in the same industries and in the same sectors, and the metrics involved and the valuations that arrived at, if you looked at them on two bits of paper, you'd scratch your head and think, well, how on earth did you get there? Now, I'm not dismissing them as not being important, because obviously, if you're in a sector and the method or standard methodology is 4 or 5 times earnings or whatever, that can be a yardstick, and that can be a help to say, okay, fine, well, look, businesses in this kind of sector sell for this kind of multiple, so that's the rules. What this does do is it commoditizes the business straight away. So before you've even got into finding out more about what the business does, how valuable it could be or couldn't be, or whether it's valuable to you or not, straight away you've commoditized it. So one business in the same sector is worth this because every other business has always been worth that, and that just isn't the case. And it's very easy to get taken down that road with evaluation. That said, I mean, there's a lot of free tools out there. I mean, there's things like the BPP Press. I think in the States you've got the Business Price Reference Guide. A lot of people I know store some weight behind that. In my experience, I go by the deals we've done. So I maintain a database here in the UK of deals and that happen in various sectors, and I track and monitor what deals are being done in the press. Now, in the UK, there's not always a great deal of transparency. You can't get accurate information all the time, but on a lot of deals you can. If you know where to look or who to talk to, you can see what kind of deals have been done. And obviously we've got a 20-year history of doing deals, so we can see what deals have been done, what are the driving factors. But I think one thing I'd say to your listeners, Ted, is what is making the valuation credible? Because if it isn't credible, you won't get buy-in from anyone else. So, is it a guy who's, as you said, straight out of college, who's not got a great deal of experience? Is it an accountant who doesn't want to lose a client, and so perhaps has a tainted view of the valuation of the company, or is it just based on sticking your finger in the air and seeing which way the wind blows? It's vital you understand what the valuation has been based on and how they've arrived at it.
Howard, one of the things that a buyer, actually one of my clients, showed me a few weeks ago, he said, here's an appraisal report that a seller got to value the business so they could do an offering price. And the claim to fame that the appraisal report, all the math added up and all the calculations seemed to prove correctly. It was well written. But guess what? What it didn't relate to is, what in the hell are the offering prices for similar kinds of businesses in the same locale? And what are the actual selling prices? And this report was silent on it. Back in the day when I was doing appraisals, we went to, in America, we have these databases that are somewhat reliable. I mean, they're better than nothing, where we can not only see what the offering price ranges are for just about any kind of business in almost any kind of industry, we can also see what the actual selling prices were. And what I'm always trying to get through to people is there's this thing called reasonable range of value. So just because the mathematics in some appraisal report seems to make sense, and it tells you something about return on investment, hey, you better look at what the businesses actually sell for. Because the worst thing that happens is for a business buyer to buy a business because the logic seemed correct in a report, and discover that if he had to sell it in another month, say has a heart attack and needs to sell it, he couldn't get anywhere near close to the purchase price. But if he would have accessed the databases that show what the actual selling prices are for that kind and size of business, now all of a sudden there's some perspective. It adds credibility to the mathematics that these appraisal reports show. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's you're spot on, Ted. I just wish we had something similar here in the UK. We don't, unfortunately. It's it's nowhere near as transparent. But you're absolutely right. That's absolutely key. What a business is advertised for versus what it actually sells for. That's absolutely key. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. The circumstances. Well, 2 weeks ago, people were looking at buying shares in airlines. All of a sudden there's a virus and you've got airlines going bust. It's all circumstantial, and I think the key thing is, if you can access tools, if you've got them to hand, like if you're in the States, then they're a powerful tool to have. But in the UK, we don't have that, which is where you have to rely on people with experience. So finding people who can do valuations or who can put appraisals together, who actually have the experience in those sectors, in those businesses. And then that's again where the credibility comes from. So if you've got a track record of, say, hey, look, I sell workwear and personal protection businesses, and I'm the man in the country for doing those. Look, I've done hundreds of them. This is what the score is. This is what they sell for. Then that obviously lends a lot more weight to it, rather than, okay, well, I looked it up online, and this is what they're kind of selling for, or this is what they're on businessesforsale.com for. This is what their asking price is. You're on a hiding to nothing if you go down that route, looking at the actual asking prices.
Howard, is it possible, let's say that you or somebody in the UK accesses some of these databases we have in the USA, where we show the actual selling prices, and it goes way beyond price. They actually show the terms of sale. If you had access to that, could that be useful in the UK, in that why would a business be worth more or less at the same profit figure and on the same other terms of purchase in San Francisco or London, if it's the same kind of business?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Would it cross over? The answer is I really don't know, Ted. I mean, there are a lot of parallels with sort of US and British businesses, but there's also quite a few differences, especially obviously on bureaucratic things like the tax and legal issues. But in principle, an advertising agency in the UK is similar to an advertising agency in the States. The methodology behind what makes it valuable or appealing or attractive should roughly be the same. And I think anywhere where you can access information and research it and work it out has got to be a help. So yeah, I think I'd love to have those tools available in the UK. But sadly, like I said, it's a bit of a closed shop. People keep things close to the chest. The information is not readily available.
Howard, one of the things I do for the buyers that I represent, not only in the UK, but other countries, is I try to share with them that information, but I put a big caveat on it, a warning. And the warning is, there could be cultural differences. There could be lots of differences. But at least what this does is put in perspective a range of pricing that's being used in the United States for the kinds of deal you're looking at, and just keep it in mind as you get local knowledge from appraisers. Is that a safe way to handle that kind of information?
Yeah, I think so. Again, you've got to remember people when they're reading valuation documents and appraisals, they tend to pick out the things that they want to pick out and they want to hear. So I think anywhere where you caveat it with how something's been put together or what you're wanting them to think about is a good idea. I mean, for example, when I do an appraisal, I'll put in various methodologies for how it could be looked at, rather than just say, well, okay, look, this is the one standard practice. It could get looked at this way, and if it is, this is the valuation. If you take into consideration this circumstance, then we'll look at this valuation. And then I always include what I call a sort of benchmark. So I'll look at the market, what's out there, or what deals have been done, and I'll compare the business that I'm valuing to that, so that they can see, if there are any parallels when they're looking at their business. And I always caveat that with, each business is different. Each business has its own unique quirks, and it's as does each buyer, and it's all circumstantial. But here is some information which might help point you in to a particular point of view.
Is there any other big red flag, any other thing you see that trips up the buyers and sellers that relates to valuation, a warning you want to leave us with?
Oh, yeah, good bit. That's a big question, Ted. Yeah, I mean, if I was going to pick any one thing, it's making sure who's done the valuation has credibility and that it's in writing. A lot of valuations done in the UK are done done for free by business brokers and accountants, but very, very, very rarely will you see them commit it to paper. So I think the one takeaway you could take from what I'm saying is, when a valuation is being done, if it's being done by somebody credible and professional who knows what they're doing, they're not afraid to put their opinion in writing and have it scrutinized. And I think that's key. So, if you're going to start arguing about or start negotiating about a valuation point, you want to see where the information has come from, how it's been put together, and who's done that. And I think if those things all add up and it makes sense, then you've got a good foundation to start that negotiation. If any of those things are off, you could have a bit of work in trying to find some common ground.
That is huge. One of the things that I say here, and particularly now that I'm no longer in that full-time appraisal business, I'm more in the deal-making business, is I refer to it as the don't blame me defense. And what you see in the written reports, and I suppose the verbal reports from some people in the appraisal business, these are the people who are not really able or willing to do their homework, maybe to try to verify or substantiate the information they get from, let's say, brokers or sellers or owners. They'll say, well, everything you've just read in this report, by the way, this is on the last page. By the way, everything you just read in this report might be bunk. It might not be reliable because I had to solely rely upon the information given to me. So it's the don't blame me defense. And so one of the things that I've been asking appraisers to do over the years, and for buyers to think about, is you better question where the data came from and how reliable it was. And it's almost like when we buy businesses, we look carefully at the warranties and representations that a seller makes about the financials. But guess what? Appraisal reports don't make any warranties or representations. They just say, I relied on all that stuff. Because that's a little scary for me.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely right. I mean, I'll put my hand up and say, you know, I've done appraisals in the past where I've had 3 pages of caveats and, you know, warnings about that. And so I've put my hand up and say I'm guilty of that myself on occasion. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's very, very easy for the advisor, broker, you know, valuer, appraiser, whatever, to wash their hands of it and say, look, you know, I just looked at a set of accounts and, you know, this is what I thought. So yeah, I think it's a pretty valid point, Ted. You want to check that, you know, what the information in that report's based on and be able to check and verify it. And you know, if it's a good report or a good appraiser or a good valuation, it should have it clearly marked out where the information's come from, how the valuation was arrived at. And again, you know, yeah, it is buyer beware. You've got to do your own due diligence on the report just to say, yeah, okay, fine, I'm buying into this. This makes sense. I can see where the information is coming from. But yeah, no, you make a very good point. It is washing your hands, and there's a fair degree of doing that, especially if it's got any legal element to it.
I think one of the reasons why my 20, almost 30 years of doing business appraisals, I never got sued, never had to sue, no complaints against me. I'll tell you why, because I did what every other appraiser did. I made sure that I had that disclaimer that said, don't blame me. And then when I took off my appraisal hat and I work for business buyers, and buyers, if you're my clients now and you're listening, I'm reminding you one more time, when you get those appraisal reports, even if it's from your own appraiser, you look at the documentation the appraiser used and you carefully compare it to what you learned in due diligence on the company. And what you're looking for is alignment, consistency. If you start seeing gaps, somebody made a mistake. And it could be you in due diligence, or it could be the seller didn't provide something important to the appraiser that you know that needs to be in the appraiser's mind.
That's spot on, Ted. You can't abdicate responsibility. Ultimately, if you're buying a company, you've got to make sure you're happy and you're satisfied with all the information you've looked at and all the information that's been presented to you and everything you've heard, you know, from brokers and advisors. At the end of the day, you're the one writing the check. And so you can't abdicate that responsibility to somebody else. So the problem is, Ted, a lot of people like to take a shortcut and they don't like to pay advisors or, you know, quality people to help them get to do this stuff. And that's probably the biggest mistake you can make looking at, you know, handling a negotiation or valuation is getting the wrong advisor. That can cost you big bucks, or even doing it yourself, which is even worse. You know, if you need help reading between the lines, you know, pay the professionals, because you'll get a payback, you know, tenfold, and you won't lose your shirt and, you know, and buy a lemon.
Okay, I want to underscore that. That's huge. Listeners, isn't it advisable to know what it's worth before sellers and buyers can put a price tag on companies? Because you see, if you get it wrong, it means there's no deal or a bad deal. Okay, Howard, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, thanks, Ted. Yeah, usually on the website, which is www.lucasweston.com, or put Howard Weston business broker into Google, and I'll come up. And I'd be delighted to take up any points if you've got, so long as you don't flood my inbox with requests for valuation, because we're pretty busy. But always happy to chew the fat and talk through these things. And if I can't help, I can always point them in the right direction of somebody who can.
Okay, Howard Weston, thank you. This is Ted Leverette. I hope what you heard was as enjoyable for you as it was for me, and valuable. Hey, if you're searching for a business right now, or you're planning to search, check out one of my books, How to Prepare Yourself and Find the Right Business to Buy. And my other book is for people evaluating and negotiating deals, How to Buy the Right Business the Right Way. You can get those books at my website, partneroncall.com. I'm Ted Leverette, the business buyer advocate with Partner on Call Network. Thanks for listening, and best wishes for your prosperity.